Hi everyone, welcome back to the Frog Pond. It's Swag Frog here, and today we've got a special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit about your channel.
Hey, my name is Revic, and my channel is Troopers on Break. We have a podcast that talks about Star Wars news, rosters, and everything that you can think of. So, yeah, we're very open, welcome anyone into community, and just have a passion for the game. And thank you, Frog, for having me on.
No problem. So today we've got a somewhat popularly requested episode. We've got an episode today on how to punch up in your grand arenas and just a couple of tips and strategies that we use in order to get to Kyber at around, 7 or even 6 million galactic power. And not to mention hold Kyber as well. So let's go right into Redvik with our first point.
Thank you, Frog. So my first point would be mods for off-meta counters. I think that's very important for those smaller accounts that are trying to punch up in Kyber, especially because a lot of times in Kyber, there's a lot of bigger teams on defense, and they'll have more GLs and more meta teams set on defense to out GP you to hold that front wall. So I think it's really crucial to get those mods dialed in for those off meta counters to make sure that you can get through those front walls efficiently. And an example of that would be the Night Sister one, where you really want to get those mods dialed in on Marin and as well as Daka and Talzin. Make sure you can get through that Jabba so you can get an easy two-shot, because Jabba is still a complicated team on defense. And if you get those mods dialed in on those Night Sisters, it's going to be an easy cleanup for you. What do you think, Frog?
Another point on that is Imperial Troopers. If your Piet isn't outrunning, like, say, a Darth Revan, then that counter is kind of moot. It's absolutely a fantastic counter, the Imperial Troopers against the classic Darth Revan team, because Malgus isn't really open for early game, so, a lot of people use just straight the Darth Revan team, even with Malik and Imperial Troopers. If you've got a fast enough Piet that's outrunning their Darth Revan, then you're going to have a much easier time with that counter. So 100% mods are super crucial to punching up. Alright, so my next point was on gear farming and trying to maximize characters that don't necessarily take a lot of gear that you can get up really easily, and ones that can get higher banners, such as Savage Opress. Savage Opress is a fantastic example of this, as he does not take very difficult gear in order to get up to gear 12, and then he only requires the 100 Kairos in order to get up to relics. He is absolutely fantastic, and his Omicron makes him an absolute force to be reckoned with when you are on Grand Arena. He's a solo monster, and then you can put him on Sith Trio later. I preach Savage so hard. Another really good one is Wampa. Wampa is so easy to farm nowadays thanks to the new addition of guild currency. Darth Vader's another fantastic one. Just these characters that are really easy to get up, that are going to get you a lot of banners, and that just helps you a ton on your Grand Arenas.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's a very important point that needs more emphasis within the community. Another example I'd like to bring up is Marin. I know she requires a lot of Kairos, and you need to get her to gear 12 to get her full kit. But once she's at gear 12, even before relics, she transforms that Night Sister team. And just like I said earlier, with that Night Sister team and Marin, you can easily get a nice, easy two-shot for that Jabba, which really expands your roster and brings more possibilities for you and when you're facing those daunting front walls in GAC. So I really love that point. That's a very solid point.
Absolutely, and Marin isn't even just good against Jabba. There's so many teams that team can counter in one shot. And the team does it at high banners as well. Excellent.
Yeah, so my second point is going into that front wall is an efficient south wall clear. So it's known in Kyber to always go for the south wall, because at the end of the day, that's where the most banners are, especially in 3v3. So in my past GAC, my opponent went through the south wall and he almost got through, but he dropped so many battles that it didn't matter. He might as well have gone for the north. So point south wall is to make sure you one shot those teams so that you get the maximum amount of banners from going through that harder wall, which goes into going with those off meta counters and having those mods dialed in. Two shine when needed, but at the end of the day, the more efficient you are on that south wall, the more of an edge you will get on your opponent and make them work harder against your defense. What do you think, Frog?
I would say I absolutely agree, as if anyone who has watched my GACs is watching this video, then you will know that I often put a very, very tough bottom wall. I put a very tough bottom wall to try and hold people out of getting those extra banners. I put my Leia down there and it gets hold like no tomorrow. And then I also focus the bottom wall when I'm going and attacking because there is more banners to be had. It's if you can get through that bottom wall, it's very true that you have a huge edge in your Grand Arena.
Very good point. Very good point. Thank you for adding that very much. That Leia is really useful. I'm going to go for her pretty soon.
Absolutely. She is such a monster, and that's a little side point. If you want to climb Grand Arena really fast, going for Leia is not a bad idea. Moving right into my next point, you also want to try and focus on teams that are really good at lower gear levels. One fantastic and commonly talked about team is the Imperial Troopers. You do not need high relic levels on your Imperial Troopers. You don't even really need relics on your Imperial Troopers for them to be fantastic. Basically, once you can get Admiral Piet up to gear 12 and get 6-dot mods on him to get him really fast, then it doesn't really matter the gear on the rest of the team. They can hold that turn meter train going for pretty much ever, and so a lot of teams are just left in the dust. Another really great team is Iden Versio. If you have Iden Versio up at higher gears, then it's really difficult to take down her team. She's an absolute force to be reckoned with in the early game, and she's just great on defense because it basically necessitates the use of a Wampa.
Yeah, very good points. Currently right now, I'm getting my 501st up. They're at gear 12, but with my gas being at a high relic already, he's doing wonders for my team. And I just want to emphasize that point on troopers. The moment I took my Piet up to relics, before I even got my Veers or my Stark up, they were doing wonders for me because once he got fast enough to push those buffs out and get that turn meter train going, I was unstoppable. So I think the Troopers are a really great team, and especially Piet, getting him up and running, it just transforms your Trooper team, even at low gears. So I really love the Trooper team, especially in my GAC.
Absolutely. Another really, really great team that is kind of slept on a little bit is getting your Gar Saxon and Imperial Super Commando up to gear 12. It is so low effort, and that will do so much difference on your roster. Those two are a team in and of their own, and they are absolutely fantastic. They're, like I said, they're super low effort.
Yeah, and I will just interject, and just in my last GAC, my opponent got stuck behind my gear 11 Imperial Super Commando and gear 12 Gar Saxton with Maul, and they're low gear, and Maul carried because he requires a lot of Kairos, yes, but they were doing most of the work by themselves with that low gear. So I think that's a very good point, Frog. So for my next point, I'd like to go the emphasis of more offense than defense. So a lot of times we put a tough south wall on D, which is understandable and great. But the north wall at times, you can go light on that because at the end of the day, like my previous point says, you want an efficient offensive run. You want to get the most banners possible. You want to grab those underdog banners. You want to grab those max banner wins opposed to those sloppy 51 banner wins and stuff like that. So I think it's very important to make sure you have enough teams where you know you can get through all the south wall and then try to go for that north wall. What do you think, Frog?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just showing off my defense a little bit right here. Having a tougher south wall means you can just slack a little bit on the top wall and leave a little bit more of it for offense. It's absolutely true. And I mean, if you leave harder fleets in the back, then it's harder for them to clear the fleets. And even if you do have a little bit lesser of a top wall than you have strong fleets in the back, it's still really difficult for them to get any extra banners there.
completely agree. Yeah, and that's where I shine the most in my GACs because I'm usually punching up 2-3 million GP and making sure I get through that south wall. It makes my opponents really have to try hard to get through my tough south wall in my GACs, which really saves me and gets me some wins at times. So that was, in my opinion, my most important point. What's your point, Frog?
One more point before we do get to that. If you once again have watched my Grand Arena streams, you've seen that I do not win with full clears. I do not win by full clears. I don't have enough ammo for full clears. But I win by efficiency and I win by having a stronger bottom wall. So that is an absolutely fantastic point. Anyways, my last point and our little wrap up point right here is balancing the number of offensive and defensive galactic legends. This is a point that I don't see talked about very often, and there's four offensive and defensive galactic legends, and it's super important to balance them so that you have enough balance of offense and defense on your roster. You want enough strong GLs to hold your bottom or even top line when you get a little bit later, and then you want to have enough offensive GLs to take out your opponent's difficult offense. Right now on my roster, I've got 2 offensive, 2 defensive. I've got Leia Organa and Rey on defense, and then I've got JML and SLKR on offense, and it does wonders for me. And then you can add Jabba the Hutt for defensive. JMK can go either offensive or defensive. Lord Vader primarily defensive, and Sith Eternal is offensive. There's really a lot that you can do with just balancing between the two. Even if it's not the fastest path to your next galactic legend, it might grant you a little bit more success by just balancing the number of offensive and defensive GLs.
Yeah, and that's a point that I think is the most important. If you're going to take one point away from this, I think it would be balancing those offensive and defensive GLs, because on my personal account, I put Ray and JMK on D with Cat. So those are my 2 teams for defense, and then my offensive teams are Sith Eternal and SLKR. And JML I just acquired actually today, so I'm going to move him to offense as well so that I have that flexibility. But making sure I have those 2 solidified defensive GLs is very crucial to me, and I think it's very beneficial for my roster and my GAC runs and how I stay in Kyber and maintain it at such a low GP. So that's a great point, Frog.
One more thing to just hit home. I mean, it really just speaks to just how fantastic of a galactic legend Leia Organa is. I really cannot sing her praises enough. She is an absolute nightmare on defense, which is hilarious because she was released and marketed as an offensive-only GL. And now people are basically using her as a defensive-only GL because she is so dang strong.
Yeah, that's CG. You know, us players will always find something unique with the character, and when we thought she was going to be offensive, we saw her beating all these GLs, but then we started seeing her on defense. We're like, how are we going to beat this GL? And
especially
really
with the
Drogon
Drogoncron.
Really shut down JMK.
Yeah.
So with the no cooldown manipulation.
Yep.
So I think that's a great point with Leia, the emphasis on her on defense. She deserves more credit.
And not to mention, she's really not that difficult to farm, and a lot of her character shard farms are going to be coming double drop farmable really soon. So now might be the time for you to go ahead and start looking at going and getting Leia. She is an absolute monster.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, and that is it for the episode today. Thank you, Revik, for coming in and talking about Grand Arena with me. It was good having you, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and say goodbye.
Thank you for having me on, Frog. Hope you have a great Grand Arena season, and good luck to you all.
No problem. Best of luck with your channel, and I hope it grows nicely for you.
Thank you very much.